This is Mary. Welcome to the IHC Craft Room.
In today's video, I'm going to show you how I made these St. Patrick's Day inspired candles. What makes them St. Patrick's Day inspired? I'm so glad you asked. Well, they're green in color, they have a copper lid, they smell like Emerald Sea, which is a bomb fragrance. You have to smell it. And they have these cute little logos, these little labels. Come on, St. Patrick's Day all day. So grab your stuff and let's get crafty.
Let's get started with materials. We're going to start with the Freedom Soy Wax. And I'm going to be using two 314 ml library jars with copper lids. And some Stabilo 16 Wicks. Some Wicks Stickums. And green liquid dye. I've never used this color liquid dye before. And the fragrance oil that I selected is called Emerald Sea. And it just smells so refreshing. I'm so excited to burn these candles. For tools, we'll be using parchment paper, paper towel, a pot holder, a small saucepan as a double boiler, a small melting pot, a 5-ounce glass measuring cup, a kitchen scale, a temperature gun, wick centering tools, a red marker, a wood stir stick, and some rubber gloves. Okay, let's get this St. Patty's Day candle making party started. We're going to start by getting our water boiling on a low simmer, and while we wait for that to start heating up, let's take a few minutes to talk about some candle maker math. How do you determine how much wax and how much fragrance you need to make these two candles? Don't worry, I'm going to show you. According to the Village Crafting Candle website, these two 314 ml library jars have a recommended wax fill of 300 mils per jar. Now remember, they may say wax fill, but this actually means capacity fill. So it includes both your wax and your fragrance oil, plus the wick and wick stickum and any liquid dye you might add. So the total of all volume in that jar should be 300 mils. Since I want these candles to have a 10% fragrance load, I need to figure out what 10% of 300 mils is to determine how much fragrance oil I need. So that means I need 270 grams of wax plus 30 mils of fragrance oil to achieve the 300 mil capacity. So wait a minute, didn't I just say something about wicks, wick stickums, and dye? Why isn't that being factored in? Because that's really negligible. It's a small amount. So why did I bring it up earlier? Well, that's because I'm Mary and I believe the knowledge is power. So you're welcome. Now let's weigh out that 540 grams of wax, but hold on for a second while I cause a catastrophe. Santa Maria, what a mess. Here comes another IHC quick tip. It's super easy to work with soy wax pellets like these ones, but be smarter than me. And before you start pouring your wax, maybe have a quick look inside the bag and see if there's a human head-sized clump of pellets just waiting to throw themselves cannonball style into your measuring cup, because it will trigger a disaster, which was oh so much fun to clean up. Don't worry, it's cool, because next we're going to measure out our fragrance oil, and the smell of this fragrance oil is just going to instantly relax all of the tense muscles along my neck and help me make a deep, deep sigh of relaxation. As always, I'm protecting my scale and table with a parchment paper and paper towel combo. So we need a total of 60 mils of fragrance oil, which we are just shy of here because I accidentally poured a little bit on the paper towel. Oopsie. We're just going to move right on, okay? Have a look to your left. The party is hopping. So it's time to pop that wax in and get a little melty. While that's happening, let's get our vessels ready. I've already washed and dried these vessels to make sure that they're really clean inside. And next I'm going to flip them upside down and eyeball the center and use a marker to drop a dot where I feel the center is. I really struggle with this, and having a guide mark really makes all the difference. It's time to get the wicks ready, so I'm going to wipe off the bottoms of the wicks to make sure that there's no debris or dust stuck to the bottom, and peel off the wick stickum and make sure that the wick is really well adhered to it. And then I'm going to do my best to get this wick centered at the bottom of my jar and use the wood stir stick to push down hard on the base to make sure that the wick stickum really adheres to the glass. There will be no floating wicks in the house of Mary or the house of Gucci. I have nothing to do with Gucci. Please don't sue me. Now that we have our wicks all set, there's nothing to do but wait for the wax to melt. Here's a perfect opportunity to work on the art of patience. I am so happy that this is sped up and that I don't have to go through it again in real time. I felt like it took a really long time for this wax to melt, and I was just so impatient. But eventually it did, and now just before taking the wax off the burner, the wax is 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's pour in the fragrance and give it a good mix. You want to make sure that the fragrance oil really gets well incorporated into the wax, but you don't want to over stir it. And don't forget, we'll be adding some color and stirring that in as well. So keep it in mind when you are incorporating your fragrance into your wax. Now, when I was making this candle, I was shooting for an emerald green candle and my shot very much missed the mark. I used 10 drops of liquid dye here and it was not the shade of green that I wanted in the end. So that's taught me now. I mean, what is this? Like the second candle where my color came out significantly lighter than what I was shooting for. So we're going to be experimenting with larger quantities of liquid dye in the future, I think. Now I have to wait for the wax to cool down to 160 degrees Fahrenheit before pouring it into the vessels. The level of impatience that I achieved while waiting for this wax to drop 2 measly degrees in temperature is like truly mortifying, but probably not news to anybody at this point, so whatever. But anyway, I did wait until the wax was 160 degrees before pouring it, so I'm just going to give myself a high five because I think I did a great job. Good for me. 300 mils fills these jars up a lot higher than I would have liked, actually. So the next time I use library jars, I'm going to use a lower maximum capacity. That's why I'm pouring between each vessel so frequently, because I'm getting pretty close to the top and it's getting a little uncomfortable around here, okay? Anyway, I'm going to use my wick centering tools and make sure to give these wicks a good tug and tuck them into the little notch on the centering tool to make sure that the wicks stay as straight as possible as the candle cools. As you can see, they are quite straight and I am super happy with that. Let's see how they turn out after they cure overnight. The tops of these candles have some significant cracking, both around the edges and near the wicks. Generally, this is due to different parts of the candle cooling at different temperatures, and it really just caused the center of the candle to sink a little bit. That's unfortunate, but it's really not going to impact the way the candle smells or performs. It just doesn't look that great, but it's easy enough to fix, so we're going to do that shortly. Outside of that though, this candle has beautiful adhesion. Both of them do, in fact. There's just no wet spots, no crystallization, no pulling away from the sides of the vessel. Overall, I just really love the performance of Freedom Soy Wax. It really does come out beautifully. So to fix the tops, I'm just going to use a heat gun and I'm going to try to avoid the wicks as much as possible and just melt the wax until I have a layer of melted wax all the way across the top of the vessel. And I'm going to just keep letting that solidify and then remelting it until it stops dropping in the center and cracking and staying smooth all the way across the top. Usually this is where I would test burn my candles, but as I was preparing to wrap up this project, I realized that something was missing and I decided to add a little fun message to each candle. So here's another materials list for what I didn't know I needed until right now. My Cricut cutting mat, white vinyl, green vinyl, a scraper, a tape measure, a brayer, my weeding tool, a knife or something to cut with, tweezers, paper towels, and rubbing alcohol. I'm going to start by launching the Cricut design space and adding a text box, and then I'm going to change the font to Trade Gothic Display. For this candle, I came up with a cute little saying, smells like shenanigans and tomfoolery. I'm going to shrink that and then go up to alignment and then align it left before I go to line spacing and shrink the space between each line. I measured the surface of the vessels and decided I wanted these labels to be about 2.5 by 2 or so. The easiest way to do that is to add a rectangle shape to design space, change its color to see it better, and then I'm going to bring the text forward so that we can see it in front of the square, and then mess around with the sizing until I'm happy with it. I'm going to duplicate that square and then grab another text box and change the font to Favorite Font Collection Condensed, and type out the first line of this really lovely verse. I'll shrink it down to size and then shrink down the line spacing and just keep messing with it until it's ready. We're going to delete those squares because we just don't need them anymore. And then we're going to move on to the next step. I'm going to add a square and change the size to 1 by 1. And then we're going to go to images and search for a free 4-leaf clover. I like this one and I'm going to add this to my canvas. Change the color to green and then size it so that it's 1 by 1. And then duplicate it so that I have 2 clovers that are about 1 by 1 inches and a couple that are even smaller than that. Good. Now let's hit make, and I'm going to go to each mat and adjust the spacing between each cut so that it's easier for me to weed. And now it's time to get our vinyl ready to cut. I'm going to use my brayer to make sure that the vinyl is really well stuck down to the mat. I'm still having trouble with this mat. I've cleaned it a couple of times and it's just not as sticky as I want it to be. I might have to give in and get a new one, but I'm not giving up just yet. Next, I'm going to take the vinyl that we don't need off, leaving just our labels behind, and weed out all the little extra pieces. I really enjoy having a Cricut machine and all of the different projects I can make with it, but it is not my favorite way of crafting. I really do not enjoy having to weed out all these little pieces of vinyl. It doesn't help that one of the fonts that I chose for these labels is meant to be like a sloppy handwritten type of font, but the vinyl took that and said, hey, that means we're drunk. Let's be drunk. Let's move all the letters around. Let's move the dot out of place. It got really dicey real quick. Next, I'm going to get some transfer tape on these bad boys and get them ready to go. Anyway, you get the point. I'm just going to skip ahead and start getting the vessels ready to transfer the vinyl onto them. It's important to use rubbing alcohol to clean the surface of the vessel before applying the vinyl. This is to make sure that the surface doesn't have any oils or debris on it, and that'll make sure that the vinyl can really adhere to the glass well. Ironically, the label that says shenanigans and tomfoolery went on easy breezy lemon squeezy, so no messing around with that one. Let's add those small 4-leaf clovers to hopefully add a little luck of the Irish to these candles. You may have noticed that these clovers don't look like the ones I cut out earlier. That's because my blade was so dull that the vinyl didn't cut well and I had to throw those out, sharpen my blade, and then recut the clovers. And on this round, I decided to make them a little bit smaller, and I think they came out extra cute because of it. Let's light these up and release some good luck into the air. By the 1.5 hour mark, we are almost at the vessel walls, except for this guy on the right, whose wick was obviously a little bit off center after all. But don't worry, by the 3 hour mark, even that little bit of wax was gone. All in all, this was very successful. Thank you for joining me in this St. Patrick's Day themed soy candle making experiment. I hope you enjoyed this step-by-step tutorial from a beginner candle maker. Don't forget to use code IHC5 for 5% off your entire purchase of candle supplies at Village Crafting Candle. If you enjoyed this tutorial from a beginner, please subscribe to my channel so that we can continue to get crafty together. Toodleloo!